Taking roll call. Committee Member Livingston.
Here.
Chair Rikus.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Wynn.
Here.
Councilmember Nusma.
Here.
5 members present. We have a quorum.
And no one's virtual, right?
No one is attending virtual, correct?
Okay, we'll start with public comment. We'll start in the room here, and if you do have public comment online, just put your hand up. So did we have any public comment in the room? Okay, great.
Okay, I'll read this so I don't go over time, because I can go off on a tangent. All right. Good evening. My name is Malika Gardner. For the past 10 years, I've been deeply engaged in the Evanston community through my platforms, Evanston Live TV and Where the People Meet, and also passing state legislation in education and simply just listening to the residents of Evanston. One of the biggest concerns I hear from the residents are from the long-term residents. They have a serious concern that they won't be able to age in place, something that they had planned to do decades ago. They have concerns that their children won't be able to take over the property. They have concerns that their children won't be able to move back to Evanston just to purchase their own home. And home ownership has become a challenge. Evanston has become very expensive. I'm aware of the senior exemption. I'm aware of the senior freeze, but as you all know, I'm sure that there's a cap on the income, $65,000. And what I have found in listening to the residents, some of them make a little bit more than $65,000, so therefore they can't take advantage of those programs. Councilmember Claire Kelly and I have had multiple meetings with Cook County. They're working on programs as well. They've been trying to change the income cap. It hasn't happened. They've been trying over the past several years. It hasn't happened. They are also working on a new program that's similar to what Claire Kelly and I and the residents want to present to the city of Evanston. But one of the representatives said that it'll probably pass in about a year or two. So the clock is ticking, and our residents here in Evanston, we can't afford to wait. This all started when I watched a very heated debate on City Council back during the pandemic. It was between Councilmember Peter Braithwaite of the 2nd Ward and Councilmember Tom Sufferton of the 6th Ward. And during the pandemic, a discussion came up about increasing the property taxes. Tom Sufferton was against it because we were in a crisis around the world. Peter Braithwaite was about supporting the system and the status quo. You must increase the property taxes no matter what's going on in the world. That conversation stuck with me. It stuck with me. And I've been thinking about how can we assist the residents since that day. Just give me a little grace here. Since then, I've watched Councilmember Devon Reed propose new ways to bring in new revenue. I've watched Councilmember Claire Kelly fight against overspending and unnecessary spending that ends up being a burden on our residents. I invited State Representative LaShawn K. Ford to come onto my platform, and the room was filled with residents from Evanston, and their biggest concern was being priced out. And he said, you know what, we need to grandfather in long-term residents. So that idea evolved into the Evanston Property Tax and Rent Circuit Breaker Program. And in meeting with Cook County, it helped to shape what it is that we want to present to City Council to help our long-term residents. This initiative was built from the ground up, not by city staff, but those listening to the residents. And we need to stop saying that we care about affordability while ignoring the real solutions. And I'll finish up here. Tonight, I ask this committee to table the discussion until the full research is presented, because if we're going to make a decision, it needs to be based on facts. Evanston is evolving, bringing in new taxpayers with greater income, but that cannot come at the expense of the very people who made this city what it is today. And as Mayor Biss would say, that would be immoral for us to leave behind those who made Evanston what it is today and who have been here for decades. The program is a necessity, and let's get it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Payton, if you'd like to go next online. There's no one else in the room.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, good evening. Just to follow up what Malika said, she and Councilmember Kelly had a meeting on Zoom with persons from the assessor's office to say how this program would work. I would encourage you to look into it and have all the documents presented before you. Currently, the Housing Authority of Cook County has a program for landlords that have their tenants in their building, but it's only for certain areas of the city. So one of my buildings might qualify for tax exemption or tax, not exemption, but a credit. They may take $1,000 off for me having a certain amount of housing tenants in my building. Unfortunately, that doesn't apply to most of the property here in Evanston, and as you know, the taxes are extremely high, and it's becoming more and more difficult to maintain supporting affordability and supporting those tenants that cannot pay the market rate rent if the taxes keep going higher. So the program that was presented would allow landlords like myself and others that take low-income tenants to be able to maintain our ability to support those persons. So if I don't have some kind of program like this, then I probably will not be able to accept any more vouchers. One last thing is currently, as you know, the current administration is cutting a lot of HUD programming. So you need to keep that in mind as well, because those people will be terminated from the program, or there won't be any HUD funding, federal funding to support those persons. So if you want anyone to even attempt to take anybody that's on any kind of program at this time, you should consider assisting, and property tax help would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have this item D5 on our agenda, which is towards the end, but we're going to move it up after the pension discussion, so people that are here can at least hear our discussion. And it's very preliminary, but we're going to get the ball rolling on this, so we are going to move it up after the pension discussions. Any other?
Yeah. Two more online.
Oh, two more online.
Yeah, Ms. Cannon, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Darlene Cannon, Second Ward. Let's see. So ensuring that long-term residents can stay in Evanston, that means prioritizing programs like the Evanston Property Tax and Rent Circuit Breaker Program. This initiative is critical for affordability. And I am hopeful that Councilmember Kelly and Ms. Gardner will be able to get the needed help that they need from City Manager Luke Stowe and staff to get the data so that they can move forward. Providing, this data is critical. Councilmember Kelly and Malika have taken upon themselves to gather data and with the help of Cook County Assessor's Office, but more work is needed. We must push for this program to get the attention and not just simply the attention, but so that it can go forward. Let's stand together to keep Evanston livable for everyone. To me, it would be immoral if we ignore this initiative and not help continue to and ensure that our variety of people live here, equitable, Black, brown, people from different ethnic backgrounds at different income levels, that everyone is able to live here comfortably. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Connolly, if you would like to go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Tricia Conley, Second Ward. I'd first of all like to commend Malika Gardner, Council Members Kelly, and the co-referrers, Council Members Sufford and Ravel and Reed, for looking at important ways to take some of the burden off of our most financially burdened homeowners and renters in Evanston through this circuit breaker ordinance proposal. Although it's imperative we make a plan for long-term solutions, including land trusts and cooperative housing options, we must also look at what we can do in the immediate future. People need relief now, and it will be beneficial to have all the data to expedite this important process. This ordinance would provide Evanston the ability to support our community sooner than later. I look forward to following your discussion on this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have one written comment that was sent in on a similar topic. This is from Fran Joy, who talks about how she's been a resident here for about 4 decades in Evanston. And regarding the circuit breaker program, she writes, "The property tax and rent circuit breaker program is not just necessary, it is urgent. This initiative recognizes the reality that seniors who have given so much to Evanston should not be forced out due to circumstances beyond their control. This program would provide targeted relief, ensuring that those of us who have spent decades in this community can remain here without fear of financial displacement. I urge the committee to support this initiative and take real action to protect Evanston's long-term residents. Our city has always been a place that values diversity, history, and community. Let's make sure it remains that way for the seniors who built it. Thank you for your time and consideration." Fran Joy.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, approval of minutes, February 11th.
Taking call. Committee Member Livingston.
So I was not here, so I abstained.
You could abstain. Okay, great. Chair Rikus.
Agree.
Councilmember Burns is here for the roll. Councilmember Burns.
Yep, aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma. Passed. Thank you.
Thank you. And as part of our fiduciary responsibility of this committee, once a year, we're going to have a presentation for the police and fire pensions to give us an update on the funding and where we stand and just an update on the pensions. So.
Well, good evening, Chairman Rikus and members of the Finance and Budget Committee. I appreciate this opportunity to report on the funding of the pension funds. I got good news. I like to bring good news. And you bring it up on the screen, I believe, and I'm not going to go over every line. I'll just give a quick review and I'll answer questions. But, we can go to the budget and see how the money is spent for the city when the city spends it, but you don't see how these separate pension boards spend their money. The boards, they're the ones responsible. They have the responsibility for spending this money. The expenses for pensions, those that are on permanent disability, survivor benefits, those are widows. And so this is from ours. We have our administrators, Lauterbach and Amon, they're well-renowned in this area. And that's just a cover sheet for the end of this past year. And there's 1, 2, there's 4 pages in that, and all 4 of those, let's see, yes, those 4 pages, they pretty much tell the whole story in a nutshell. And basically what we're always, you want to see the total expense, what it costs to run a pension board for a year. This is just for the fire, this is not for the police. Tim has a very similar set of books. And then if you roll on to just the next one, just to give an idea for the whole, go back, I'm sorry. Let me see, I'm looking for the thing that we're always concerned about is, I guess, is on page 3. It's, oh, I'm not that sure. It's on the page 3, is the net position held in trust for pension benefits. That's the number that we're always looking at. And that's 129. I'm happy to say, this is at the end of December, our funds had a very good January. I just got the report yesterday. Our funds had a very good January. And that might all go to hell in a handbag, but we're doing well. So that's the one piece. Again, these are how so money we take in, this is how we spend it. Okay, recorded by our administrators. So if you move on to the next sheet.
Excuse me, can I just add one thing? You can see the additions, the 13 million of contributions, but about 12 million was earned. So 26 additions, 11 deductions, which is what we paid out in benefits. So that's why the increase. And this is an all-time high.
Oh, yeah, by a mile.
By a mile. So we're working on both ends right now.
Right. But then also, I think I did have some questions about expenses. I think that's the next slide. Keep going, one more. And I did a 6-year study so you guys could see how we spend our money year to year, because with a pension especially, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So if you go one more slide, please. Bingo. And this is straight from our budget books. And you can see the bottom line, actually, since 2019, even though our net available for pensions was only 89 million, we had 300,000 in expenses. You can see we've actually cut into that. And as of right now, it's hard to read right now, but it's only 269 million.
And the biggest is
269,000. Yeah.
We moved the investments over. So if you go to the investment fees, we were paying 200, and now we're paying 148 because we consolidated it with the state. So
I
that's
think
a big
that
change.
the public should know that we're good stewards of our fund. We don't overspend. We see areas like we have to go through education to the state every year, so many hours, and we try and use the ones that are free. But we've made a conscious effort to cut our costs to the bare minimum. Then the next page, and these are the first year's results. And again, the pension fund is not a sprint; it's a marathon, and that's why the actual policy that we're supposed to review the policy closely every 4 years. But I just thought I'd give you kind of and that milestone is July 24th, 2027. But I'm just giving you a little benchmark here of how we did the first 12 months of audited results. And I think that's important. And I would like to come back in late summer, early fall, when we have the audited results of 2024.
And we're going to get an updated actuarial report.
At that point also. So I think it's good to have 2 of these. And I think that was on your original schedule.
Yes, it was.
Okay. But this is, it speaks for itself. I'm certainly not going to read through the whole thing, but we have 3 highlights. We're used to the net pension liability was growing. We put a halt to that by an average of $9 million a year. And in this first year, we reduced the liability between the 2 funds by $30 million. Now, it's not just 100% funding. There's a lot of things that go into it, but it's certainly, they did happen at the same time. So that's a good, I think the city, they've gone to an extraordinary level to fund us 100%, and it's showing results. I think that's really important. That's a big number compared to the additional money that was put in, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then the third thing is, I was also looking at levies, and amazingly, I have and these are straight from these are from the budget. That's on exhibit number 3, is the levies for the fire safety pensions and the police safety, collectively, they've gone down by $580,000. That's a lot of. Well, here, it's right there. If you see, I have the numbers there. It started at,
It's the 5-year, yeah.
it's right in the book. It shows it. I showed it has snuck down. And it did help that we didn't do 3%, right, Tatesh, I think? There was not 3% put on this year, the levy. So that lowers it right there. That brought it down. But collectively, I think that we've lowered the, we not only just froze it, that it's gone down by $580,000. There's some significance there. It's moving in the right direction. So then, so that's what I have for right now. What else did I put anything else up there? I don't think so. That's, I've cut. Yeah.
Question on investment expense on page 6. We see that it's gone down from 199 to 148, so about a $50,000 change. That's due to consolidation and the fact that the funds are now managed at the state level. So does that mean that Evanston is just one community, we've saved $50,000 here?
Yeah.
That same or similar chunk of change is being saved at hundreds of communities around the state?
That was the promise of the consolidation.
Right.
That
So
not
that
only they could
State
actually.
policy is actually working.
Right.
And they get better implementation because the fees on the expenses are much lower because it's like, a billions of
Right.
dollars there. So the performance was actually really good. We can bring it to the next one, but they exceeded their benchmarks and the performance was very good.
And again, I'll say, I gave you a 1-year report on this. It's just, you got to look at it. It's a marathon. But we'll have a better look. We'll have 2 years by August. And I'd like to come back and report then. But is there any other questions?
Jack, I agree with everything you said there. It's really good to see that the funding is getting better. I have to point out that we have been using excess reserves from the general fund to make the contributions. So that we haven't had to raise property taxes. That's absolutely the case so far. But we have, between the Northwestern Stadium fees and excess reserves, there has been a pocket of money that we've been able to access that has fortunately not resulted in property tax increases, but that's still something, TBD down the road to stay on this critical path to get to full funding.
Right,
And
but-
probably I think it's year after next or so, but it's been very fortunate that the excess reserves have, I think have been spent exactly as they should be, which is to retire this liability as much as we can. But it is something that likely at some point there's some degree.
And I thank this committee for lighting that fire. You guys did a great job. Now, it's funny, this past Friday, someone called me up with a question about the pension fund. I get a lot of questions. And they asked me a question I couldn't answer. And they directed me to the budget, and they said, why was, there was close to $30 million for the pension funds. I forget what fund numbers are, the last one. They said, those aren't there anymore in the 2025 budget. Why is that? I'm going, I don't know. I'll get back to you. Well, that has sent me on a 20-hour-a-day journey looking at why this $30 million of expenses that were said pension funds have disappeared. So I'm going to hand out some thick material. I'm going to cover maybe 4 pages of it, but I want you to have the backup so you can look for these things, because I stumbled on something pretty interesting. So what this is what I stumbled upon. It's covered on I put all together, I put on this as a cover page. And then again, Tim said he'd throw a net around me if I try to put this whole thing in, but the important, I'm sorry. What I wanted to do is put in all the backup material for my comments. And tried to annotate them. You'll see I did them in hand. I just wrapped this thing up like it's 4:30. But basically, in a nutshell, again, we established that the public safety pension payments, which shows an expense, that expense is shown in the general fund, correct? As either used to be called pension or non-governmental. I've got that correct, right? So the actual payment, the expense to the city, is in the general fund. But when you go to the all fund summary, when I got 24 here, and you'll find this somewhere in the packet. If you go to the all fund summary, this is, I could find it. I don't have 20, I actually have 22 in there. But I was using, let me see, I apologize, I don't, a little better organized on this. I didn't want to get deep into this thing. Well, you can find, it's, yeah, well, it's actually page 2 of attachment 2. That's an example of that's an all fund summary. Yeah, it looks like this, guys.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. And in that one, you'll see some numbers on there because I was doing a paper trail. I've got the general fund underlined, which is B, that goes back to the rest of these funds. That's the general fund, which includes the payment, the expense to the public safety pensions. But C and D down here, which are part of the budget, those are the payments that our pension boards pay to the retirees for their benefits and for our administrative fees. That's, these are $27–30 million. The city does not pay these. They come out of our budget. Well, that's why I went to 24, 25, because the guy called me, so 2024 has these, it's 30 million. And by 2025, they've disappeared from the budget. And I asked, I says, well, are they still funding the pension? I'm going, well, I think so. So I started digging into this, and that's what this packet's about. I can walk you through it. So what the city's been doing, they've been expanding their expense of the general fund, excuse me, not the general fund, the full budget. They've expanded that full budget year after year, and these aren't small amounts. For the last 5 years, do I have that on the cover sheet? It totals $136 million of expenses that are shown on this all fund summary, which is an expense thing, expenses, and it's a phantom. They're not paying these expenses. This is pretty serious. And I don't know if you guys know, but I'll rest in just a second, is that the police and fire boards, we've joined hands to perform a forensic audit of our funds and our funding sources. And this is just a prime example of why we're doing this. This is a major guffaw. And I see in the 2025 budget, they didn't put it in, and they even went back on the other funds, the other years, and scrubbed those back by like 25 million and stuff. I mean, this is, the guy that called me had a right to be concerned, but I said, but I was able to, because I had to print them up and show them, well, here's where the pension funds is funded out of the general fund. He says, well, that doesn't say pension, it says non-governmental. But that's the pension fund, right? The pension funding? Well, no, it's a simple question.
Just a point of information, if I can. I want to be recognized by the chair before I speak. I would like to talk to staff. I feel like the suspense is continuing to build.
All right.
I don't want it to continue to build the entire meeting. So if staff can help us understand what is being expressed right now and what our point of view is, I would appreciate if we could do that.
I'll in just a second. But I wanted to show this guy that, it's getting, don't worry, it's
Let's see
it's being funded.
let-
But that it's being funded, but I had to go back to 2021 or 2022, where it was listed in the general fund, and all that paperwork is in here, that's why I did 2022. It was listed in the fund as a pension payment for police and fire. Then they combined them, and they drew it down to a non-governmental payment. And so I can see why my pension member was concerned that the city wasn't funding it, but what I stumbled upon was this huge amount of expense that are tacked onto the budget every year that, expenses got to be covered by revenue. And all this, all this drumbeat for we need more revenue was inflated. That's by, again, in 2024, it inflated the budget by $30 million.
Let's, Committee Livingston, and then we're going to have our treasurer talk.
So, and maybe Hitesh and Clayton could clarify this further. When we put together the budget materials, you mentioned that we, before we were sort of grossing up both the revenues and then the contribution to the pension fund. So there was expense between the city and the pension fund. There was revenue from the various sources that we used to make the pension contribution, and then separately revenue was shown on the side of the pension fund. So in effect, it kind of looked like 60 and 60 rather than 30 and 30. And we had a very open discussion about how those were being shown. Really the underlying substance is 30 and 30. 30 of revenue, 20, we're using some excess reserves, and then 30 of expense. So we're not showing expense in both places as it was shown before. We're just showing a $30 million expense going from the general fund into the pension fund. And so it was talked about openly when the budget was pulled together. Maybe you can add that further, but I don't think there's anything at all untoward relative to the source of the pension contribution or the contribution of those pension amounts of approximately $30 million to the two funds. So we definitely talked about it at the time, and there was a change in presentation.
30 seconds, if I
You
might.
we've got people here, and then I'll get to you, Committee Member Newsom.
I'd like to hear from staff if they concur with Mr. Livingston's explanation. I would like to say that an allegation or an insinuation that there's a $30 million phantom in our budget is a pretty serious allegation.
It is. That's why
And
all the paperwork's here. It is very serious.
And you just got finished saying the pension is in a great place. And so I think for the benefit of our community, making such a serious accusation or insinuation in public, knowing that there's probably a very reasonable explanation, does our community a disservice. To put that kind of uncertainty and fear and doubt in the community when there's very likely a reasonable explanation is not productive for this committee, not productive for the city. So I would like to hear Hitesh kind of validate what David is saying.
Good evening, Chair, the members of the committee. Yes, you're right. Look in the past. I mean, he talked about the years too. How did we fund the pension payments, right? Everybody got paid, fire pensioner, police pensioner. We gave the money, whatever the required contribution per the actual. Now comes to the talking about the pension budgets, So what we have done is, if you look into the general fund, we have booked or we have shown $19 million as a revenue. And this is, again, sometimes it might seem confusing, but I have to do it as it required, So we are showing $19 million as a revenue, which is a tax levy. We are showing $29 million as an expense in general fund. So what is the difference? That difference is the fund balance use of general fund money. So it's all there. It's simple, clear, So I don't know. I mean, where is we hiding the money? I mean, I'm speechless, yes. I mean, how would you fund those things, And the numbers are there. Did you get the money? Let's look at your bank account for the last year. Did you get what was levied there or not? It's simple as that. Instead of talking, let's look at the bank account. Let's look at the record statement and add up the numbers. Does it add up? So, yes, I agree with the council member that these are the kind of, I mean, it's not kind of healthy for a city versus pension for relationship. We try to do the best, like yesterday, as a part of that contribution, that extra 10 million, we transferred the first installment because we said March, April when we get the first installment. So yesterday we transferred almost 2.5 million to police and fire pension combined, which is the first installment. We'll transfer more in April and then again the second installment, which is in August and September. So yes, I'm yes, surprised. I don't know where to start, but again, the budget is out there. You can look at it. General fund budget will show $19 million revenues, which is the tax levy amount. General fund would show $29 million in expense. The difference of $10 million is the use of fund balance.
Thank you. And Councilman Keller?
Thank you. So just so I understand, I also want to hear from Mr. Schoolmaster, and I appreciate that they're here this evening. So I did notice, like this year in the all fund summary, we don't list police and fire pension. Every year we have, yet it hasn't been in the total amount of our budget. When we budget, I think the issue is not about funding the pensions here. I think the issue is about what we're needing to meet in terms of a balanced budget, that when we add, up until this year, in the all fund summary, in addition to the line item within the general fund for the funding of our part, what the city has to pay, in addition to that, embedded in the general fund as, what is it called? What's that line item called? It's not called pensions, it's called non-departmental is what it's listed as. In addition then, on the all fund summary every year, up until this year, it stopped. There was an amount listed for fire and police pension that was usually a little more, it seemed, than what we were funding, which meant we had to balance our budget with that amount. So am I restating that correctly? I think
we really have to move on.
No,
I
but
think
this is
very important, but I think we're going to take this offline.
But wait a second,
We're
I was not complaining about the budget. I was complaining that they were using the pension funds to falsely expand the budget. Because I know I could take, numbers have to tie back. The numbers they put in there, they tie back dollar for dollar for what the pension funds pay for the pensions, the benefits, and what we pay for our administrators.
Okay, let me just make a suggestion here.
They were dragging our expenses.
Okay, we're over the time limit. This was something, I asked for materials ahead of time to review. This was something that just showed up that I need a lot of time to digest it and review it. I'd like to, thank you for bringing it up. If there's a misappropriation of funds, this is our responsibility and we want to know. Let me finish. I give everyone else time. We need to digest this and talk to Hadesh and Clayton. This is a big packet to go over. We've got a lot of other things on our agenda. The main purpose today was we wanted to see how the pension plan was doing with the full funding, the performance, where we're at. I definitely appreciate you bringing this here because it's something we need to look into, but I don't think we can resolve it in this forum right here. So we will come back next month with a full memo on your questions and get it answered, but we're not going to solve it today.
And
it just can't happen.
It was not a question about funding. I want to be very clear about that.
Okay.
It was about misrepresenting our expenses as the city's expenses.
Okay, we will definitely look into this, and we appreciate you bringing it up. It's just, in this forum is not a place to get all the answers.
I think Mr. Schoolmaster.
Okay, Mr. Schoolmaster, and then we're going to move on to our next agenda item.
30 seconds. Timothy Schoolmaster, Police Pension Fund. Our numbers are in the material he's addressed. When the proposed budget came out, I appeared before this committee and I appeared at the council committee because in the budget was a statement that the assets of both the police and fire funds were in the general fund, which is false. Not one dime of the assets of the funds are in the general fund. And maybe that comment got somebody looking because it's disappeared from the 2025. It was in the 24, 22. Okay, and then you have the original documents, but now in the summaries, those items have been scrubbed. They have disappeared. They were there, and now they've disappeared. Just another reason why we're going to have to do this forensic audit. And we're happy to talk further with you, but this is, it's gone too far. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move up the D5, discussion of property tax circuit breaker referral. Does someone have a memo? Okay. Okay, Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments. And this is a referral that I submitted along with Eleanor Revelle and Tom Sufferton and Devon Reed. And we're still waiting to get all the, well, anyway, I think we all understand the point of this. This is, we know many people are often displaced from Evanston because of the high cost of living. And this is a program that would help offset the cost of living for targeted for long-term residents. We initially stipulated 20 years or more, and not necessarily, it would be those who are not eligible to receive other property tax breaks.
Is there income limits on this?
Yeah, so that's part of what we're waiting to get is still, we were able to get from Cook County some of the numbers regarding those who already received the senior citizen freeze. But we don't have the numbers yet to really be able to talk about exactly where those numbers would be. So we know we need to move forward with this program, but we are waiting to get all the stats on, the number of long-term residents that are here. And so this would apply, say, to folks also not necessarily 60 or 65, but we have people who are in their 50s who've been here 20 years and who are, just living on the brink. So we know this is a very much a needed program. Like I said, the Cook County and the state have just introduced legislation for this, but it'll probably take a long time to get through committees. But this is, states and cities across the nation do this to help really allow people to continue to age in place and not be forced out due to high property taxes. So I look forward to gathering all the data so we can come back with some real specifics for you, hopefully by next month.
And are other communities doing this?
Yeah, there are other communities, not in Illinois so much, but in other communities in the nation do this, and whole states do it too. Like I said, the state of Illinois right now, I was hoping that Fritz Kagi could come here tonight to talk to you about it. I won't try to, I think I do have actually their initial proposal, which I can share.
Councilmember Burns, did you?
Yeah, well, that last point was the point I was going to make. I think there are quite a bit of people missing from this conversation. I think when this comes back, Director Flack should be here. Mitzi Gibbs should most certainly be here. A lot of the data, or at least the data that you just said you're looking for, could be easily provided by Mitzi Gibbs. So that's the first thing. I think when this does come back, we need to make sure that everybody is here, Mitzi Gibbs, Director Flax. This is just a permanent subsidy. We've talked about this in many different contexts, both homeowners but also renters. Right now, the city of Evanston has, with local funds, is able to support short-term subsidies, rental subsidies. The long-term subsidies are for renters are provided for by the Housing Choice Voucher Program, but that's all this is. It's a permanent subsidy or a long-term subsidy for homeowners, potentially renters. I think one exists for renters already, obviously. And I talked to Director Flax about this. This is something that is going to be discussed as part of the strategic housing planning process, which we've started. It's underway, and we're going to continue that discussion next month. I think we could have the discussion here, but it really needs to fold into the strategic housing plan, especially because of the sources of funding that was cited in the memo. I think it said Northwestern, real estate transfer, tax money. The point of the strategic housing plan is really to help guide how we use those funds over the next several decades. And so again, I think this is a conversation that should happen. It was going to happen. This is just a permanent subsidy. There's a lot of work to determine who qualifies, who's eligible, the source of funding. I mean, there's a lot to this, which is why I think it's appropriate to have it within the context of our strategic housing plan. But again, that's the point of the plan, and that's why we've started that work.
Committee Member Livingston?
Yeah, so I guess my primary question is, the general fund is already in a structural deficit because of the incremental pension contributions that should go for another 15 years or so. And so what is the source? I would just encourage that it's up to the council about if they feel it's appropriate to subsidize some residents' property taxes. Although I'll say, the city of Evanston is a very small percentage. It's under 20% of that total property tax bill. It's much more a function of how schools are funded in the state of Illinois. It's really a state question. But regardless, if we are going to do this, again, council prerogative, I would encourage the council to maybe raise the city's piece of the property tax levy to provide the funds to then redistribute to the program. We don't have room in the general fund today to absorb an incremental program. We're already going to be, we already are to some degree struggling to continue to fund what we just talked about, which was $30 million and going higher amounts for pensions. So again, I just encourage you, if you decide to go forward with a program like this, it should have revenue attached, incremental revenue attached to it. And perhaps that's the piece of the city property tax levy or it's something else, but there's not, either we have to find cuts somewhere else or we need to get truly incremental revenue. And then that will provide the money to sustain the program, would be my suggestion.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a top priority for our city council, is really to, affordable housing and supporting those who are in need and who are burdened by, we don't want to see more people displaced in our community. I do want to tip my hat to Malika for really getting a spark going on this. This is such an important program. But the reason we can't really tell you right now, we put some sources out there because we don't have the numbers in terms of if everybody got it who was in need, what that would look like and how it can be done equitably and democratically. So I don't want to start to talk about sources yet until we can actually provide some numbers. So I think that's what we're looking to get our hands on, to get those numbers and to really get, it won't be exact, but to at least get that ballpark before we begin that conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, and today was just to highlight it, that this is a program that's going to be starting and we'll get more and more information. And thank you to our participants. And Councilman Burns?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I didn't really have time to do a ton of research on this, but I think the circuit breaker program I think the state used to have a program like this and they no longer have it, but I want to say it was paid back, some of it, maybe all of it, some of it was paid back if the home was sold. So, again, there's a lot to this. I don't think what's being considered here is to do exactly what the state did because their program was different than what it sounds like we're trying to do here. But I think the main thing I want to make sure is that this doesn't go ahead of the strategic housing plan. I mean, to me, that is incredibly important because there's a whole host of things that we can do for affordability. We can do this, but we also can spend money to acquire land that people can live on affordably, right? And so there's a lot of different strategies. This could be one, but let's continue to have this discussion within the strategic housing planning process.
And I would just like to mention, I think part of during the whole Envision Evanston process that's been going on, a lot of what I've heard, and I know many others have heard, is everyone's like, we're talking about housing for people that don't live here, like affordable housing, which is good. I'm not knocking that. But I think there was a lot of concern that what about the folks who are here now? What are we going to do for them so they aren't displaced? So this is in response to that outcry. I'm sure I know you've heard it too. So that's really in direct response. And we can begin, like you say, we can begin programs like this. This doesn't have to be a whole, revised comprehensive plan or Envision Evanston or zoning to move forward, as many cities have. And I just want to say there are many different ways that different cities fund these. Some do it through wealthy, like businesses that make over a certain amount. They have a certain tax to help offset those costs. There's just myriad ways of funding. And I do think we want to come forward and provide a collection of all those different ways that different cities have approached funding this. So. But again, I think we need to get our hands around some numbers of what that could look like, just again, ballpark, before we can start talking about really how we would fund that. And maybe it would be, 3 or 4 sources. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing it up. We look forward to the numbers. Speaking of numbers, we are going to talk about our preliminary year-end 2024.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Rikus. We don't have a formal presentation on preliminary actuals other than what is in the packet tonight. The audit is well underway, so the numbers you see in these tables are likely to change by quite a bit between now and June, and especially in the enterprise funds where we have a lot of adjustments for capitalization, depreciation, and debt adjustments as well, and adjustments in other funds too. But this is at least a preliminary look into how our financials appear to be finishing 2024. And we'll be back in June 2025 or July 2025, mid-year, with the final annual comprehensive financial report. Obviously, we talk a lot about general funds, so I'll just touch briefly on that. We did have a budgeted deficit last year of about $10 million. We, as of now, have a deficit of just $2.1 million, which is right in line with the projections that we gave towards the end of last year. It falls kind of in the middle of the low and high projection that I got up here and talked about many times, so it's kind of right in the middle. Now, fortunately, as I've talked about several times, we received $10.8 million in permit revenue from the Northwestern project. Were it not for that $10.8 million, we would have been a whole lot closer to the budgeted deficit of $10 million. So this is, again, where that structural deficit that we talk about comes into play. Fortunately, that one-time revenue put us in a nice spot to finish 2025 as we were showing, but still something we have to keep an eye on moving forward. And again, included throughout the rest of here, you can see capital improvement fund. I'll flag that one too really quick. You can see we stand to finish around a deficit in the fund of about $7.2 million. We did issue bonds last year to pay for 2022 and 2023 capital projects, but we did not yet issue those bonds for 2024 projects and the projects that happened last year. Instead, we've been using, as you can see, there's still cash in the fund, a cash balance of about $2.6 million. That difference is cash that's reserved in the fund for projects that have been completed but not yet invoiced by IDOT. So we've been able to draw on that cash balance, but as you can see, we're continuing to approach zero in cash in the CIP fund, necessitating potential bond issuance at some point this year or identification of some other funding source for 2024 and 2025 capital projects. So that's the brief overview that I was going to provide. The numbers are there if you have any questions.
And can I just add, with the capital improvements, it's much closer than it's been in the past, because I think they didn't they allocate per year the expense instead of putting it all in at once?
Yep.
So there's about $1 million difference, which is much better than we've had. The $2 million you can see in the general fund. And I think I have a couple questions. Councilmember Kelly? Committee Member Livingston?
Sure. Clayton Hitesh, I think the degree of improvement that we have in forecasting has been tremendous, and the clarity in our forecasting has been, in our presentation has been great. Last year, and we can highlight this when we went through the budget, we had a very open discussion that we were not budgeting the Northwestern Stadium fees in the 24 budget. That's the reason why you had the variance there. But in totality, the year, throughout the year, and as it came in, was right where you said it was going to be, within an understandable and normal amount of variance given expenses and revenues. So I would just like to commend you on that. There is no issue relative to pension contributions and funding. We need to just find a way to clarify, to clean up that discussion, to get them happy on that. But it is absolutely the case that these financials, in my view, are very transparent. Your forecasting is very good. We had some ups and downs during the pandemic due to all sorts of things, state income tax, sales tax, all that. That fortunately, all came through, leaving us with a good base now. So I'd just like to congratulate you on the degree of accuracy that we now have, and the predictability in our financials. So, thank you.
Yeah, I agree too with the forecasting. And just a couple things. The capital outlay, The budget was 272, was 2.9. Was that the fire truck? Is that?
That difference is the purchase of Little Beans.
Oh, Little
The
Beans,
South Lake
okay,
Rec
so
Center.
that, so that was voted on. And then the interfund transfers, I know we voted on those too. So, I think any major variance, again, has been transparent. We have either recommended to council or council has voted on. So, that's good news.
Thank you.
Touch, you want to add anything, or?
Thank you. And again, yes, I appreciate, and as Committee Member Livingston touched on, we continue to make improvements and inroads. Yeah, a couple of things, Little Bins, obviously, but it was approved and we discussed that. And at the same time, the permit revenue, right? We discussed that, but we decided consciously that, yeah, we don't want to budget for that. The other good thing is not necessarily on general fund, but throughout the other funds that, yeah, we had almost, I think, 6.6 million in investment income. So, yeah, that has become kind of an active investment, seeing the market trend and whatnot. We will have a little bit deep in that for this year, as there will be a couple of rate cuts, but we see that. But at least, yeah, that helps us a lot throughout the other funds, too.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to go into the debt management policy, and Clayton, thank you. You've spent a lot of time on this. I hope everyone was able to look it over. We tried to mirror it kind of the pension policy, and Clayton will go through it with us right now.
All right, so the agenda has all the materials from last time as well, the presentation we walked through. We took the feedback and basically laid it into a policy format that reads very similarly to the pension policy. It looks and feels kind of like the pension policy. We talk a bit about the goals of having a debt management plan. And I guess I should say that
Page 35 of 59, if you have that.
Thank you. We took a look at the comparable communities and some of the language that they have around debt planning and debt policy, and that's sort of the direction we went here. So in section 2, we talk about the types of debt and the funding instruments that the city uses. We talk about general obligation bonds and differentiate between general obligation debt and tax-supported GO debt. We talk a bit about low-interest loans through IEPA and WIFIA and how that's a funding mechanism that's largely repaid by our wholesale water customers. We talk about other debt instruments, none of which we, other than special assessments here, that we actually currently are taking advantage of, but acknowledge that there's other types of debt instruments that we may consider using in the future if the market necessitates. And we remind folks about our outstanding pension liability and that pension policy and commit to following that policy as well to meet that debt. We talk a bit about eligible projects and when it makes sense to issue debt. We include some bullet points, some criteria that the committee can review and offer feedback on in order to evaluate the types of projects and when it makes sense to issue debt and when it makes sense to hold until the market improves and rates make sense. We didn't think it made sense to include tons of data on our benchmarking communities other than committing to continuing to work with this committee to provide that benchmarking data so you can see how we stack against our comparable communities. Section 4 is or I guess that might be a typo there. Actually, I have 2 section 4s in a row. But section 5, managing outstanding debt. That's probably the one that's going to garner the most discussion, and that is talking about our debt limit. We set a debt limit, as I talked about last month, the city has no legal debt limit as a home rule community. For non-home rule communities, the limit on debt is 8.625% of EAV. So we use that as a benchmark to set a couple targets for both tax-supported and non-tax supported debt. And there was also some interest in using a per capita measure, so we include that here as well. We talk a bit about IEPA loans and WIFIA loans. There was some discussion about including a target for those as well. We didn't set an exact target other than saying that the revenues from wholesale water customers and the fund balance be available and able to meet those debt service obligations on an annual basis. And then the last page, we talk just a little bit about how we fund future incremental debt service. As we all know, there's some looming large capital expenses for the city in the form of the public safety building and potential future of the Civic Center. So we know there are huge capital needs that remain. We talk about how we fund that potential future debt service, any incremental debt service above what we have now, either through property tax levies, new revenues, revenue generated from the sale of properties, grants, which we, as a the Public Works Department always seeks out for projects, significant one-time influxes of revenues, and any excess reserves that may be available upon completion of the audit. So I think that's the best time to talk about using excess reserves is once the audit's available and ready to nail down exactly what those excess reserve amounts are. And then finally, in the last section, we talk a bit about some general criteria to make sure that we maintain our current bond ratings, some general things that we commit to following our fund balance policies, following our public safety pension policy that's been established, and a couple other items as well. That these are just general things, good practices, best practices that many of our peers have also included in their budgets and debt management policies, debt management plans. So happy to take any feedback, but if there's any changes, we can incorporate those and advance to City Council at some point for their review and adoption as well. So, Hitesh, did you have anything else? Or no? Okay.
Any questions? I think we should spend a little time on Section 5 about the percentages, as long as, if we're all in agreement with those. Oh, Clayton, do you want to just, Section 5, I think, even though we don't have to have a limit, we're imposing the 8.625. And then there was, discussion with the water, but the water revenue comes in the liability, so we have that separate there.
I mean, in theory, it looks good that if we set some 5%, 6%, but again, because of the uncertainty, as I think Clayton touched on, the big projects, potentially in the next 2 years or 3 to 5 years, civic center, public safety building, whether any service center, at least rehab. And we might have to touch on, we might mean the council or the finance, and but suddenly if we have like say 50 or 100 million, I don't know, but yes. So it looks good, but I don't think it is necessary, to have that kind of limit. We already have a self-imposed tax-supported debt limit, and I think that's good because that says that, okay, what would be the burden on the taxpayers in terms of property tax? Touching on the second aspect of the water bonds, there's no need for that as long as we can. And obviously, we have talked about so many times that, yes, we make money on the wholesale customers, and we subsidize some of those, our City of Evanston operations, the way our contracts with them, and particularly the Northwest Water Commission, which is a 50% of the water consumption, and considering the rate of return we charge them and whatnot, So I don't think there is a it's not a kind of a prudent to put any number limit there, that, okay, we should not have a debt of more than 100 million in water fund or sewer fund, as long as I think the policy talks about it, that as long as there is enough revenue or fund balance to pay for the debt service, to make sure that it is viable, So, yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, we have a couple. I'll start down there at Councilman Kelly, then I think Committee Livingston. Councilman.
So it would be great to get a long-term, a 10-year projection on our capital and infrastructure costs and what looks, to be funded, unfunded, so that we can plan going forward. And is that something that we could, does that seem, I guess that would be maybe, I don't know whose office would do that, some sort of a 10-year projection on those costs.
I mean, it is hard, right? Ultimately, those kind of big decisions, anything for the improvements, that comes after the City Council. So, yes, I mean, we can work with, say, Lara or somebody and say, yeah, what is the next?
Sure. No, I mean, I've seen other cities do this in terms of, like, you have so many facilities, roofs are going to be, you have all kinds of upgrades that are going to happen. So projections on that, on the maintenance of facilities, upgrades, roads, just there's a lot, of infrastructure for cities. Right. So I think it's good to have an idea so we aren't broadside. All of a sudden, we're like, oh my God, we got to leave a building. It's falling apart. So I think it's good to have a sense. It won't be, of course, exact, to your point. Do we ever do, I'm just curious, in terms of the water fund and parking, do we ever, the enterprise funds, is there a difference between like issuing a revenue bond and just a straight go bond in terms of, are the rates different or how does?
Yeah, revenue bonds, because it is now backed by the revenue, they are generally expensive.
They're more expensive, okay. so that we wouldn't do that for an enterprise fund.
Always do geo bonds.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And then, I guess I would also just remind us that in some of these comparison charts that we do have, like Skokie rolled, I just want to say it for the public, that their amount has their pension debt rolled into that total amount. So, because they bonded out on their pensions, so that's why ours isn't included when we list our total debt compared to Skokie. So if we did throw that in there, we would exceed Skokie's debt, so.
And these
you.
attachments are just for our purposes. We're not including the benchmarking. That's just for us, but thank you for bringing that up. Committee Member Livingston?
Yeah, so I agree with Councilmember Kelly that we need to do our best to come up with a projection. Because it does seem that we're at a time where we might exceed whatever long-term target we want to be at because of a public safety building, because of what happens with the Civic Center longer term. So there's always a base level of spending, and then, of course, I think it's fair to say we are at a time where we have some larger long-term capital items. So let's do our best to understand, sure, maybe we want 8.625 in the long term to be a limit of equalized value, but we might go to 10 for a while. So let's just do our best to say, look, we might spend 100 million here, we might spend 150. What are the bounds, and how bad is that going to be before it starts coming back down? And that's the key to a plan like this. Do our best to forecast, come up with meaningful percentages of EAV, and do our best to stick to it, even if we realize we're going to go higher than our long-term average for very good reasons for a period of time. So just encourage us to do our best on the forecasting, knowing that it's hard.
Do you want that added to the policy, the forecasting, or is it just
I
going to?
think yeah, that we would periodically forecast and make sure that we're
So can we add
within our
a
target.
section on that? So, Councilman Newsman?
Thank you. I'll just weigh in on the water debt portion of the proposal here, and I just say it makes sense to not impose a debt limit for water treatment because we make money on that. As long as we're able to cover the payments, please issue 3 or 4 or 5 times more if possible, because we are making money on that.
Councilman Kelly, did you have anything else?
But that would be part of what we'd ask to be incorporated into our regular sort of debt management plan, would be sort of a forecast. And David, would you say ideally like projecting out 10 years? I think I've seen that in other cities.
Yeah, I think 10 years should get us hopefully through a bump and at least start seeing that come back down. So I think 10 years is probably a decent forecast horizon, and we redo it every 5 or something like that.
So Clayton, if you can add maybe a paragraph and send this around, I'd like to vote on this next meeting. I've spent a lot of time going through it. I think it's very comprehensive. I think it'll be really nice to have another policy. So if you can add that, you'll send it around. We'll give everyone enough time to review it. If there's any other corrections, copy me and Clayton, and we'll discuss it. But
Are we confident we can get to the numbers by the next meeting, right? It could be that, hey, we're all okay with the words here, but we may or may not know this is what we want to use for our longer term target and how much.
What numbers are you talking about? The 8.625?
Yeah, the limits. Yeah, the limits. So, I mean, we can get the words in, still be working on the forecast, and say we're comfortable with this. We will max out at X or whatever it might be. But I don't think we want to rush the policy before we have a really good view on how high do we think our debt numbers might get, and is that acceptable? So
we also talked about putting 8.625, but this could be increased by a majority vote of city council or something like that. I mean, I think we have to put something down, and there was a lot of thought with this number.
And I would agree that without Laura here and not knowing where those conversations are, I don't know if that would be available for the next meeting. But what you just talked about is exactly how our current debt limit works. It's basically historically been an arbitrary number that's been set by city council. And then when we have to issue the debt that exceeds that amount, they've historically raised to match or go over by a little bit. So that, in practice, is how it works. This level gives us a little wiggle room to be able to probably get to the decision point on some of those bigger projects. But again, if we're not ready to adopt it with these particular numbers, we can always hold until forecasts give you a better idea. We're okay either way. But it's the narrative and the language is there, and it's in a good place right now. But.
And I think we should think about it because these numbers were also derived from the benchmarking that we did. So, Councilman Burns, did you have a comment?
No, I just wanted to say I appreciate I would like some additional time to go through this. I've been probably neck deep in healthy building ordinance stuff, and honestly have not been able to dig into this, but I will. And I just want to make sure I understand. So to send any questions, concerns, ideas I have to you and city staff.
You can blind copy everyone, but we can't have discussion with open meetings.
Okay,
so
perfect. I'll make sure to do that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we just wanted to have a starting document because it's easier to change it. And I think, again, Clayton worked really hard on this and to really incorporate, and you'll go through the exhibits here, a lot of other things that other communities had done. So thank you. And again, that's why we don't have to vote today. We wanted everyone to take time to digest it. Well, in April, again, we kind of feel these percentages are okay, but we want to add that we want to do the projections, but we'll discuss that. But I don't know if by April we'll have that, probably not. So I think by April, we want to look over the policy, make any changes anyone has. If we still are uncomfortable, we'll wait another month. But the goal is to get the policy done, and like the pension, things can always be changed by city council, but a policy is better than no policy, so. Okay, so now we are going to, did you have one more thing? We're going to have an update on the zero-based budgeting pilot.
I said, that's right. I was going to say if we could get it maybe a week in advance of our next meeting to look at, that would be great. And this is sort of apropos, I shared that resolution declaring support of preservation of the federal tax exemption of municipal bonds, since I'm glad you think that that's not really a threat, but it's something the National League of Cities is asking cities to sign on to in protest because it looks like that is a possibility of eliminating.
Yeah, just to back up, there is some talk that tax exempt status would be eliminated, which would be horrible for a lot of talk for municipalities. So Councilman Kelly was at a function over the weekend or last week where a lot of cities are adopting. Do you want to read it or?
Sure, I shared it. I think you all have it in your email. I won't read it all, but I'll read the opening sort of preamble. Let's see. So it says, whereas the tax-exempt municipal bond market is widely used source of capital for states, local governments, tribes, territories, nonprofit borrowers, et cetera. It goes in all the whereases, why it's so important. And then it says, now therefore be it resolved that the governing body of the city of Evanston encourages Illinois congressional delegation to assist the city of Evanston, Illinois, by preserving the tax exempt status of municipal bonds by supporting and ensuring the protection of the federal tax exemption of municipal bonds. It's in all of your.
Just supporting to keep the municipal tax.
We're adding with all the cities.
And they want all the cities to sign it. So do we want to vote to bring it to council or? Yeah, okay.
All right.
Does someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I mean, I know there are thousands of communities in the thing, so yeah, and I think all these organizations like NLCs or local boards at each state level, I think they're working on it. I don't know whether, and you were there, Councilmember Kelly, I mean, this is the one aspect that which is already there, tax exempt. But the one thing which we lost, it was a tax exempt status of advance refunding. It used to be the tax exempt, and for the last few years, it is taxable now. So I don't know whether was there any discussion to bring back that or just this thing?
This was the main focus because that's what, folks are going to the Hill yesterday to really focus on this.
Okay, because I was wondering that if we can just even add that language, I don't know. But
Well, this is a pre-done form that she has, right? That all the municipalities are signing.
I'll see if we have that too. I'll email the
If
chair.
we're contemplating council approval, that would come in the form of a resolution, I'm fairly sure, and I guess this would probably require a formal referral to honor our process. I'd be happy to sign on as a co-sponsor.
Okay.
And I guess the vote of this committee tonight is kind of pre-endorsing a referral that hasn't yet been made,
Okay.
which is cool with me.
Great.
Okay, great.
All right, do we want to do an actual roll call, or are we good consensus-wise saying that?
Just
Maybe
point
we
of
could,
information.
then we could pass finance and budget.
I'm trying to do better with waiting to be recognized. No, you're good. Because it's not a referral, we probably should just, I think we can give general direction. I think our referrals process, before we take a vote on something, it really should go through our referrals process. But if we're, let's just do that. We can give kind of general support now, and then let's refer it, and then we'll get it back at some point.
All right. Yeah, so I think we'll just hold now, general consensus to agree. We'll wait for it to come back as an actual item after it's gone through the referral process.
Great. Okay, thank you all. Okay, an update on the zero-based budgeting pilot program.
So we have included the item, but the important thing, which I think Clayton has worked on, is like a 4-page RFP, and obviously we needed committee's feedback before we go to the city council with that.
Can you back up which department and kind of give us an all update on
so
that?
in terms of department, we haven't decided. I think we wanted to have a feedback. We had just like a brief conversation with Luke, but we could not agree on the department because we had focused on what is the goal and what's the referral and all that. But I think we want to talk to Luke after what we hear today, at least about, any other feedback, and particularly in reference to that 4-page RFP, that, okay, do you agree with the scope of service and whatnot? At the same time, we looked at our purchasing thing, that we can do a formal process, and we don't have to go to the city council right now, but if the responses to the RFP comes about 25,000, obviously we have to go to the city council with that. Even if it's under 25,000, obviously this committee would hear this thing, and if this finance budget committee say, yeah, let's share with us, full city council too, we would do that. But the important thing at this moment was to kind of have a review of this RFP and scope of the service, what's our goal and whatnot. So have we covered everything, based on what we heard last time? That's the main, kind of right now our focus is.
Oh, Councilman Burns, did you?
Yeah, I think I think from talking to staff, what I heard is there's no cost to the RFP process, so you didn't feel like you needed to go to council for something that doesn't cost anything. So I just wanted to kind of mention what you told me, because I thought it would need to go to council, but I guess I agree if there's no cost, we could do that. We can authorize that through the Finance and Budget Committee, or really staff could authorize that themselves. The only other thing is, I think we mentioned last time that we would want the consultant to weigh in on which department to select, and this is written as if, it's kind of written as if we're supposed to.
So here's the thing, and that's why we wanted to talk to you before we rush the item to the city council. Because, like, suppose if we say, okay, we are going with Parks and Recreation, for example, then there could be 3 responders who are like retired Parks and Recreation directors, or some consultants working in that department. If we decide to go with, say, Public Works, there could be 3, and I have seen that, like in other communities, the retired city managers, retired directors, they kind of do this kind of thing, If we go into the Public Works, the whole dimension changes now.
That makes sense. That makes total sense.
Right. So that's why, and Luke said, look into some, and then we will look into talk about the department and all that again, and that's why we want to hear that.
So that's the direction you're looking for from the committee.
Look at the scope of the RFP.
But I mean, you're looking for this committee to determine what department. we
I
want to
mean,
focus on.
not necessarily department, because I thought that it would be more administrative unless you have like a all unanimous thing, but I don't think I'm looking for the department. I'm looking more for the scope in the RFP.
Well, I guess the reason why I'm saying that is if you're saying that if you're saying that a certain type of consultant will respond to an RFP for Public Works Department as opposed to Parks and Rec, I mean, I would like this, committee to weigh in. If not this committee, if we don't feel it's appropriate for this committee to make the decision in the full council, because again, personally, I was comfortable with the consultant deciding, but it sounds like that's not necessarily advisable. But if we're not going to have some outside party that's familiar with how these things work provide a recommendation as to which department we should start with, I would want us to really make that decision. Because personally, I feel like we should do Public Works, but for reasons that I've already stated. But I would want us to weigh in on that decision. I wouldn't want that. I would want to make that together with staff, unless we're going to allow an outside party to make a recommendation.
I mean, it was tough. We talked about it at one point, I think, right, Clayton, that, okay, if we put it like, okay, Parks, Recreation, or Public Works, or Community Development, like, say, 3 departments, But I think the person who is responding, and they might say, yes, I can do for the Parks and Recreation, or I can do Public Works, depending on their. But at least we thought that might be hard. So, but yes, again, we are ready to hear.
Do you have a recommendation on which department?
I mean, I think, talked about the Parks and Recreation, and the reason is they have like, I don't know how many business units, 40 plus, right? Different business units. There's a lot of restructuring. There's a lot of staff turnover there. So that's where we thought that, okay, and sometimes it's not just eliminating some service or the people, but maybe better align with our final city council goals and provide better and efficient service. So that's what we thought, because in last 5-6 years that, somebody left, okay, let's fill in, let's do this, let's create new business units. So I thought that Parks and Recreation would be the right fit. Councilmember Burns felt that, okay, no, I'd like to go and see whether we can do the Public Works.
And we decided to start with one. Councilman.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask the same question as Councilmember Burns, is what department are we going to choose? And so just, it sounded like for a minute we considered an option of putting 3 departments in the RFP and letting the bidders, choose one.
We can do that. If this committee feels like that, we'll talk to staff. And if you guys agree, then we won't go to the city council at that point. We will bid out, out of one of these things, we see the response and then decide on it.
Where do you get the list of people? From other communities, or how do they find us?
And that's the uncertain thing. In some of these other auditing service and banking service, we know, so we send out to the top 10 people. Here we don't know, so obviously we would put it on our city website. We will advertise. We will put it on the website called Demand Stare, and so that we try to have like a wide response.
You can also go to some of the accounting firms because they may have a separate consulting division that does this kind of work.
Right.
I think it might be helpful if we're deciding, somebody's going to have to decide which department, to look at the budgets of each department, and that certainly would be a data point that I would want to consider as we make that decision.
So if you have something else, otherwise I thought that, okay, we will have this discussion with the city manager and see what he feels, and we go from there.
I think it's going to be a more efficient process if we can identify the department first, because if you go out with these 3 departments and then we know who an expert is. Yeah. So, and then we're going to say, this bid was just as good as this, and which one. So I would encourage, if you want to come back to us with your recommendations, looking at things like total budget, what the increases have been through the years, full-time equivalents, things like that.
Okay.
Councilman Burns?
Yeah, I support that. Yeah, I just, and my thought was that an outside party with experience in this would do that type of assessment and then, help us, kind of guide us on which department is best. And so if we can do that work, then I would feel confident in the recommendation. I think my thing is, as I said at the last meeting, if this doesn't yield much, if anything, it's less likely we'll continue it. And this is something, as the person that made the referral, that I would like to continue if it's worth it. And so it's really important that we pick the right department to start with. But yeah, if there's a way that we can, if we can assess this, come up with different criteria and really evaluate this thoroughly.
You can come up with certain like top
Yeah.
5 metrics.
Yeah, and I can work with you on that.
Expenses,
Yeah.
And I'll provide some comments as well. I'll send that to you.
Yeah,
if have
and
any
I
thoughts.
don't
Thank
think
you.
we're going to go wrong with either one, because the bottom line is we want to get started with one, because if we don't start with one, we can't broaden it,
So I just want to make sure what I hear is, or the direction is, that we come up with those, some of the metrics for you to make a right decision. Okay, thank you.
And if everyone else, again, we're not voting on the RFP because we don't have to, but if you want to look at it, if there's anything else, where did you get the information? Was there another community that's done this, or you came up with it on your own?
Most of the bullet points came from Councilmember Burns' referral, but the process itself, we took a look at GFOA. They put out some language on zero-based budgeting and how best to go about it, and so we borrowed their language, their process, their terminology, and thought that made sense. But we also kind of leave it open in the RFP. If the respondent has a better system or has experience that we're not aware of, we're open to that feedback through the RFP process. We left it pretty broad, but kind of gave some parameters for them to follow.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another referral, community engagement and budget prioritization revenue strategy, and this is from Councilman Burns.
Yeah, wanted a little bit of feedback if there's any to provide, and then I was going to work with staff to kind of put some put a little bit more structure to this. But essentially, what this is that what I've noticed is that, and we're seeing this with Envision Evanston as well, that when if the issue is an issue that could have a tremendous impact on the community, if we don't bring them along with us and make them feel like the decisions that are being made are their decisions, are decisions that they agree with, then what happens is there's always a large contingency of people that reject it, reject a large part of it. And so I would like to change that. Instead of us saying, oh, well, let's do that just to have a bunch of people disagree with it, how can we, with our budget, have a discussion with the community about, and really get their temperature on, different revenue sources. What is the appetite for raising property taxes? When would we want to raise the property tax levy? Under what circumstances? What information might they want before we make that decision? Really helping them understand what the potential impacts could be of raising property taxes versus having kind of progressive fee structures. Like, for example, one of the things that's been proposed, I think, by Councilmember Reed was, the more cars you have, the more wheel tax you pay, right? Does that make sense to the public? We need to have that conversation with them, so we're not, the 9 of us on council are not just making decisions that ultimately large parts of Evanston will reject. It would be so much easier if we could say, look, we had a conversation with the community, and this is what we came up with to move forward and to fund the things that are priority for the community. So, just wanted some general reactions to it. And again, I'm going to work with staff to make this more concrete. But that's really the idea. If you can bring people along in the decision making, it completely reframes the nature of it, and it becomes a us thing instead of, oh, you're trying to impose this on us. And so naturally, we're going to reject it because we don't see ourselves in it. We don't feel like it was our decisions that contributed to the proposal. And if we can avoid doing that when it comes to addressing our structural budget deficit, I would like to do that. And again, we have a great example with an Envision Evanston, what happens if we don't get that right. And I don't want to run into that same issue when it comes to addressing our structural budget deficit, and we know we have to. We were only able to raise, I think, an additional $2 million from the exercise we did to come up with new sources of revenue. I'm sure we'll make another attempt, but we know at some point we're going to have to make some decisions that everybody won't like. It'd be great to bring more people along in that discussion at the very beginning, and so I'm trying to figure out how we might be able to do that.
I have a question. So, it just seemed there might need to be some kind of materiality or dollar amount, because if everything goes, nothing will get done. So I don't know if that's something
A
you've
dollar
thought
amount,
about.
sorry, what do you mean?
Like, we can't have everything go to the community, every single decision that's
Yeah.
being made. So how are you deciding which ones would go to the community and which ones wouldn't?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I think the first thing is just reactions. Like, I don't, we have, I always say, I really commend this council for creating this Finance and Budget Committee, because it allows us to discuss our budget year round. But obviously, everyone's not here, right? Mary Brzezinski is here, and everybody else Mary's at a lot of meetings. And, we get the regulars, but there's so many people that aren't here. And so the question is, how can we check in with them to just allow them to understand some of the things that we have to consider up here? And I gave one example. I think it's possible that some people may appreciate the way progressive kind of rate fee structures work if they understood that that's even an option, as opposed to us continuing to raise the property tax levy, to look at ways to, to put the burden on certain things on people that are contributing more to it. I think it's possible that if we explain that to people, probably through focus groups is really what's coming to mind. I don't think this is a referendum. Anybody will check yes or no based on a few sentences. I don't think that's the right way to do this. I think these are community conversations, focus groups, where we're explaining some of the things that we have to consider up here, getting some reactions. We won't be able to take them through everything that we have to consider, but we can kind of narrow it to certain things, and then we'll at least have some information we can use to make a decision about whether we want to raise the property tax levy or increase fees or whatever another Councilman Reed has talked a lot about non-residents. Can we put more of the have more of the burden of paying for things on non-residents? We've kind of all for the most part, rejected those things because we don't want to make Evanston less welcoming. If we brought that out to the community, they may say, no, we actually like that, right? So, instead of just 9 of us making the decision, this is an important enough issue because of the size of the structural deficit, where I think at least for a time, whatever period that is, a few months, a year, whatever it is, let's invite them in to help us make those decisions.
Councilmember Newsom.
Thank you. I appreciate where you're going with this, Councilmember Burns, and the idea to get more community involvement in the big decisions, in whether they ultimately agree with it or not, they will feel that their voice has been a part of the conversation that will help us get to where we ultimately need to go. And this is the kind of thing that's why some of us have ward meetings and office hours and are engaging regularly in our communities with our constituents, to have conversations like these in a unstructured way. Other than that, it's on the calendar once a month for a ward meeting check-in. What you're looking for is something a little bit more formal, and I can't quite at the moment grasp what that looks like. There's probably something, and it sounds like you're kind of in the same place. So how do we get from a vague, kind of amorphous concept and desire to something that we can put down on paper and say, okay, this is the plan? Like, how do we get from here to there?
I think it's just general. I think for today is trying to get a sense to your point of what should we focus on. If we wanted to, if there was information that we think would be helpful to get some feedback on from the community, what would those things be? And don't necessarily even need it today, but just even in the coming days, that's the question that I think would help me work with staff to put more structure around this.
Councilman Kelly?
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. I think, educating the community about the importance of the budget, and that the budget is really the blueprint of our priorities, and that engagement is so important. I would recommend just right now, just sort of spitballing a little bit. This committee could even be like every other month, as long as we have I'd like to see it noticed on the calendar and recorded. Maybe every other month, a certain number of us agree to be here for a community topic, related to budget and finance. Just as a thought.
Committee Member Livingston?
Yeah. So it does seem like this is a core duty of the council member, right? To know what the people in their ward think about these. And, there's a variance in how much people have ward meetings, but I think that is the best way for you to know what your people, what's important to them. And that's what they elect you for, right, is to do that. In some ways, I think we can get to the point, and maybe Evanston is there, I don't know, where we're soliciting too much input, right? It's just, most people aren't going to, speaking as a non-council member, okay? Most people will not pay attention until the issue is red hot in front of them, and they will say, I don't want to spend any more money, all right? But that's not good governance, right? That's just people's gut reaction. I don't want to pay any more. I don't see the value of this. So I don't know if there's a substitute for more ward meetings, talking with the people that elect you to know where do the people really feel, knowing that ultimately there's probably going to be a big reaction that's a bunch of crankiness, right? But you got to get through that to say, look, we have to do something here. What's the general view? So anyway, that would be my view of people can choose to go to ward meetings or not go to ward meetings, let you know on the ground what is really important to them, and then it's your job to interpret what your ward wants. And I think that rather than you do, I mean, just my experience here, you get the same people commenting all the time, and there's a big world out there, and most of them aren't going to tell you. It's up to you to pull that out. So that
Hitesh,
would be
did
my
you want
view.
to say something? And then I'll get to Councilmember Burns and Councilman Kelly.
I mean, I pretty much kind of agree with what committee member said. And again, ward meetings is a good tool. And again, it's not like in one ward meeting you would know because somebody might not be there. But like, okay, from now on, say until June, like we start the budget process sometime in July, August. So in the next 3 months, if you have some dedicated time, every ward meeting at last 30 minutes, okay, we want to know, And it could be open-ended. So sometimes, as you said, yes, no is easy, But sometimes if it's open-ended, we like this, or we want this to be cut. These fees are higher. Or why don't you do that, like you said, progressive taxation? And ultimately, after we hear from all the 9, council members at the end of the June, that, this is what we heard in last 3 months. And then we would summarize some food. I think we did that, right? Some kind of survey, and we came to you when we did something. And we can say, these are the, looks like the top 10, 15, and the finance budget, or the city council can say, yes, let's do that. Try to incorporate this in the 26 budget. We want to see that, reflected in. I think that's what I feel personally,
Councilman Burns?
I think Councilman Wynn.
Oh.
Yes, a number of years ago, and I'm sorry I can't remember when it was, we did a community survey in which we gave people a list of city services, and it was a fairly long list, and we asked them to rank them, and then we aggregated the numbers. And I mean, it was interesting to see. You could see general trends in terms of what people thought were the most important city services and that they valued the most. And
did you get a good response?
yes,
Wally's participatory budgeting.
it was.
2018, we did that. I mean, I think some of you would know in 2018, I know when I just started and say,
Was that
this
when
is
we
the
did
goal.
it?
2018.
Okay.
We
Oh, I thought
started
it
in
was longer ago
17,
than that.
but we completed in 18, and we listed 100 services.
It was 100, yeah.
And say, okay, tell us top 10 and tell us bottom 10 that you don't care for if we eliminate.
Yeah.
And you're right, exactly. We got the survey, aggregated these, went to the council and said, this is what.
And we
Did
actually
you take action?
Yeah, I mean, it did shape the budget, and especially the bottom 10 was useful to know, as well as the top 10. But it did shape the budget that year, and we did get, a serious enough response that we could take it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You might be able to bring to the next meeting or send us if you have
Let
the
me
old.
find out, if we have something, but you're right.
Okay, I have a bunch of lights. Councilman
I
Kelly.
think I was next.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was
Councilman
priority-based budgeted. I think I think there was I know with the youth and young adult program, for whatever reason, I know there was something with that where there was a lot of pushback. I can't remember exactly why. I don't know if that was ranked lower on the list, but it was a controversial thing that happened, but it probably was very informative too. So I definitely think that's something we should look at. I think the difference is that as council members, we don't have the resources to do something like what I'm saying. We have only recently a virtual executive assistant, really no support in our ward meetings. It's just us. And then we don't have a lot of time. We have an hour. And that's the same issue here is we have an hour and just 1 hour, right? And we could span it over several months, but there's other topics that we need to get to. So what it ends up being is a lecture. Anytime I've had a test shot or anybody, like the only thing we have time to do is lecture people. We don't have time to educate them, right? And that's the difference in what I'm saying here. We're kind of piloting this with housing with the Jackson and Emerson site. We have a RFP that just closed where we're not just going to start with a proposal like here's a development, react to it. We're literally going to take people through an education about how housing financing works. What is affordable housing? What are common definitions? What are common misunderstandings? You have to give people a kind of base level of education before they can provide, what I would feel is like the type of feedback that will really help us make decisions, different than what we could do by, again, just getting kind of general feelings. That's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to lecture people. I don't want to get kind of general, off the cuff kind of feelings about things. I want them to understand, things as we do and then help us make decisions about the direction that they think the city should go in. This isn't something that I think we need to do for every decision. It's just similar to zero-based budgeting. You do it once. It informs the several budgets, I think, the next several budgets, and then you decide when you want to do it again. But, the reason why I said focus groups is because in a focus group, you can spend more time. Two things. You can spend more time educating people, one, but two, you can select the people that you feel best represent, the community or whatever target audience you have. And so we did this. We had some incredible focus groups for Fleetwood and Gibbs Morrison, where we're trying to understand, how we can improve and expand and strengthen programs there, how we might be able to expand the kind of footprints of both spaces to better serve the needs of the community. And we went out in the community and invited people to participate in the focus group to make sure we had the type of representation we're looking for. We didn't just send out an email saying, hey, if you're interested, let us know. We know what we're going to get when we do that. And so I'm not as worried about representation because I've had quite a bit of success working with staff to make sure that those groups are represented. So I just want to make that clear. I think there are some things we can learn from the priority-based budgeting process that the previous council went through. I don't think council members alone have the time nor the resources to really do this well. I'm not just trying to lecture people and put a whole bunch of information on them, and at the end of that meeting, expect them to have anything, to say other than, again, those kind of immediate reactions. And so there's something else that's needed. And I will concede to Councilmember Newsom, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, but I think we'll figure it out.
Newsom?
Yeah, thanks. I agree with what Mr. Livingston is saying, is that essentially that's our job as council members, is to take all this input in from whatever source we can get it and make the decision here on the dais as to how to allocate our money. I pulled up some information on this priority-based budgeting, which was for the 2019 budget. And just, yeah, and I have this information in front of me because at the time the council was considering this, I was president of Citizens Greener Evanston. And we, as an interest group, went through the 152 things and very, carefully marked which ones intersected with our priorities and advocated very strongly for those particular items. If we have a procedure like this, I would expect the exact same kind of thing to happen, where interest groups, some of which I am very much in alignment with, would advocate strongly for their particular priorities, which doesn't capture the 90% of the population that's not aligned with an interest group, and who, as a representative of the entire community, as a member of council, I now have to consider those needs as well as my particular, issues that I'm personally passionate about. So, one of the potential pitfalls of a process like this is we just set it up to be run by interest groups, which is not giving us the full picture of what the community at large needs.
Yeah, and I would just simply say focus groups. I mean, you're everything I'm hearing today is really kind of affirming why I think focus groups are a better model for something like this than to just blindly send out surveys. I don't think that's the way to do this. Again, we got to consider that. I don't want to, speak out of turn, just out of nowhere. But what I can tell you is that we have had success. The biggest issue we have is that every time we put out a survey, the same demographic responds almost every time. And Fifth Ward usually is not well represented in it, and there's a bunch of other groups that we all know that aren't represented. And so what I'm saying is personal invitations always do a lot better than just putting stuff out and expecting the people that you want, to participate to sign up. It's not effective. Personal invitations, right? And now how we identify those people, we got to have that conversation. I think there's a lot of ways we can do it, but the thing I want you to leave with is personal invitations. That we're going to get a lot further going that route than putting out a survey blindly.
As just one point of information, and I have this readily available because we talked about it last night, when we did the engagement on the Civic Center needs, we did an online poll, which kind of we always do, the same kind of thing. But then we did that scientific survey, which was very, legitimately structured and, reached out across demographics. And that online survey, we had 755 responses. The scientific survey was to 400 registered voters. Very interestingly and surprisingly to me, the results were fairly similar. I was expecting perhaps a more significant difference between the random kind of self-selected survey and if you care about it, are you going to even click on? So I just offering this as a point of information. That the survey, at least in this case, was fairly accurate compared to the scientific baseline.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, I just want to say, it has to do with the outreach. If people aren't attending, it's really on us, and there's always a way to make that happen, whether it's, holding if we were doing it through finance and budget, to hold the meeting in the Fifth Ward, but there's a way to get people there. So it's just, I think even with the Envision Evanston process, I see some cities that have banners across the top of their homepages, make sure you're checking in. So I think, there is a way to get people involved, and I do think it's helpful when people do come together to hear other people's voices, to help clarify their own thoughts sometimes, or get new ideas and get more input. Thank you.
And the only thing I would add is maybe a multi-approach, because for example, I might not come to a focus group, but I would fill out a survey. So you might be able to attract, but the main thing is we don't want to delay decisions, and we have to decide which groups, what topics we would like to bring up, and that has to be done in a thoughtful way.
May I just add, though? We do want to be careful and deliberate carefully. We don't want to rush either. I mean, I think it's important to get community input. We're, a public body. But
not for every, I think we have to.
But I would say we also have wonderful boards, committees, and commissions, such as this committee. And I think we have these fabulous volunteers, many of whom are experts in their areas. Like, I would like to see more actually vetted through the boards, committees, and commissions, and better outreach also. So.
And if I can, just one last thing.
Sure.
I'll just leave you with, I think if we send random things out to people and ask them how they feel, they'll say no to it all, because nobody wants anything to increase. But when you invite them into a process where they have to make a decision, right, it changes the whole nature of it. And that's, again, I think we got to figure out how to do it, but I'll just leave you with that. They'll say no to everything if you ask them kind of on the fly, but when you invite them into a process that requires them to understand what, the information that we have available to us, and where as part of your participation, you're going to have to make decisions, you get a very different reaction. And so if we can create that process, I think it'll make our decisions easier, And even if we make the same decisions, at least we can say, look, it was informed by a process, right? So we can't be accused of not being transparent and not bringing the community along. We'll at least be able to point to this real process where we got really good feedback to say, look, this is what it informed raising a property tax levy. Because there's people that I talk to all the time that say, look, raise the levy. I get it. It's spread out across all of us. If we do it, carefully, it won't create, issues with housing costs. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that, but there are people who have that position. How many people in Evanston hold that position? I think we can, try to get a better sense of that. And that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I do want to say one thing. I don't know if Councilman Nguyen will be with us next in April, so you will? Oh, okay, because I was going to give you a big thank you, but I'll do that in April. So
I think it's
just
May,
didn't know the
right? That's what I'm saying. Is May is last day. That's all I'm saying.
okay.
I was just
Okay.
clarifying that.
Two
yeah.
more. Okay, I didn't know how the system works, so, yeah. Okay.
On that note, though, about April, we will be in our new building at the Morton City Hall, 909 Davis, for our April, what date is that? Something? April 8th meeting. We'll be there. So more information on that, please check online. We'll be in communication with you all in the committee, of course, about what that looks like. So same time, new location. We'll see you next month.
And if there's things you would like added to the agenda, please let me know a week before, and we'll be bringing up some of these things we talked about today with some more detail. So thank you for all your help. Thank you for everyone. And do I have adjourn? Second? Okay. I call for adjournment.
Thank you.